started as an ordinary summer's day in 1981. Blue skies, scuffed Adidas Sambas and the distant sound of a lawnmower chewing up someone's front garden. I was 14, skinny as a mic stand, living in a small village where the biggest excitement most weeks was a territorial scrap with the lads, the mods from the next village over. We had a sort of unofficial rivalry, like we were extras in The Warriors, only with fewer baseball bats and more acne. At the time, my world revolved around music. For me, the louder the better. Motörhead and Sabbath, obviously, but also Iron Maiden, Saxon, and dare I say it, a bit of Blondie and Shawaddy-Waddy. I had my own little system for taping the top 40 off the radio, trying not to catch the DJ's voice, and flicking through Kerrang like it was sacred scripture. I was kicking around outside the shops when it happened. The moment, Tim, one of the older lads from the village, about 17, with hair down to his shoulders and a denim waistcoat covered in studs, pulled up in a knackered Ford Cortina. He leaned out the window, grinning like he'd won the lottery, and shouted, "All aboard!" He waved a ticket at me like it was the last one on earth. "Spare for Heavy Metal Holocaust, Port Vale. You in?" I just stood there blinking. Heavy Metal Holocaust. I'd read about it, sure, Motörhead, Sabbath, Triumph, Riot, but it felt like something mythical, a pilgrimage for proper metalheads, not 14-year-olds with paper rounds. I legged it home like a bat out of hell. My dad, God rest his soul, was sat in the kitchen reading the Echo, cigarette smouldering in the ashtray, coffee in hand. I skidded into the room, breathless. "Dad, the lads have got a spare ticket, big gig, Port Vale, Motörhead and Sabbath, can I go?" He looked up, raised an eyebrow, then shrugged. "As long as you don't do any bloody drugs," and that was that, permission granted. I was out the door before he'd turned the page. Early next morning, I was folded into the back seat of the Cortina, knees wedged against a speaker. The windows down, an ace of spades blasting loud enough to shake the rust off the roof. The whole car reeked of patchouli, beer and brute. Someone passed back a lukewarm 2-litre bottle of cider. I took a sip. My first taste of rebellion. Warm, flat and totally glorious. We were heading cross country to Stoke, and I had no idea that by the end of that day, my idea of music, of everything, would change forever. I thought I was going to see Black Sabbath, but what I got was Ozzy Osbourne, reborn in front of 30,000 metalheads, and I was there when it happened. Before Cortina growled its way out of the village, gears grinding, backseat rattling, and 4 teenage metalheads packed in like crates of sweaty vinyl. Tim, the ringleader of this little adventure, had the ticket that changed everything, and now he had the wheel. He wasn't much older than me, maybe 17, but to a 14-year-old, he might as well have been Lemmy himself. I've not seen him in decades, but I heard he ended up a drummer. Makes sense, he always had a rhythm about him, even when he walked. The car smelt like a teenage dressing room, stale crisps, brute aftershave and roll-ups. There were empty fag packets on the dashboard and pre-scribbled into the dust on the glove box. On the stereo, or what passed for one, was a Maxell cassette Tim had made. Motörhead, Iron Maiden, Saxon, Sex Pistols and a bit of Blondie for good measure. "She's fit," someone had muttered earlier, nodding at the tape cover. No one disagreed. We weren't quite old enough for full-blown debauchery, but someone had managed to nick a couple of oversized plastic bottles of woodpecker cider, warm and flat from the boot. I'd never had a drink before, not properly. But when that bottle got passed back, I didn't hesitate. One sip and I felt like I'd levelled up. Not drunk, just buzzing. Like I was stepping out of the bubble of childhood and into something altogether louder and looser. The journey took hours. Pre-GPS days, we relied on crumpled AA route maps and guesswork. There were plenty of wrong turns, a dodgy detour through a farmyard and one stop at a service station where someone tried to blag a Motörhead patch from the vending machine. No luck. Conversation bounced round the car like loose change. Best riffs, loudest gigs, which band had the fittest backing singers, and whether Ozzy would show up sober. We still thought we were seeing Black Sabbath, it said so on the ticket, and no one had thought to check otherwise. As we got closer to Stoke, we started seeing more and more patched up denim jackets, battered bikes and vans plastered in band logos. It was like the metalheads were migrating, a slow-moving army converging on one sacred site. The energy shifted, we all felt it. When we finally rolled up to Port Vale FC, the stadium loomed over us like a giant amplifier. The air buzzed with feedback, beer and anticipation. You could hear the bass in your chest before you'd even crossed the gate. And there I was, 14 years old, hair a mess, cider breath, heart pounding, stepping into the beating heart of a moment I'd never forget. I thought I was just tagging along, but I was about to witness a resurrection. The gates at Port Vale swallowed us up like a beast hungry for chaos. From the moment we stepped onto the pitch, it was clear this wasn't just a gig, it was a tribal gathering. There were thousands of us, packed shoulder to shoulder, a sea of denim, leather, studs and sweat, banners, flags, Union Jacks with band logos spray painted across them, and the constant clatter of cans underfoot. It was glorious mayhem. It didn't take long for us to spot some familiar faces. Over near the halfway line, stood tall and smug in their leather jackets, were Mitch, Tim's older brother, and Pete, another lad from our village who fancied himself a bit of a rocker philosopher. They'd come on motorbikes, parked somewhere in the chaos outside the ground. You could smell the oil still clinging to their jackets. "All right, lads," Mick shouted over the rising noise. "Didn't think you lot would make it." They looked like they'd been there for hours, sunglasses on, cans in hand, already half deaf. Pete grinned at me, ruffled my hair and leaned in with the sort of smirk that only someone older and wiser could pull off. "Hey, just so you know, Sabbath aren't playing," he said, as casually as if he was commenting on the weather. "It's Ozzy, solo set." I blinked. "What?" He nodded. "Swear down, blizzard of Oz, mate. Rhoads is with him, should be wild." I felt my stomach twist. I'd come here expecting Sabbath, the doom-laden gods of metal, the band who basically invented the genre, and now I was being told it wasn't them, it was Ozzy without them. For a split second I was gutted. I didn't know what to make of it. I spent all my morning paper round money from the last month on my ticket to see Motörhead and Black Sabbath. Now all I was going to see was their sax singer. But then Pete added, "Trust me, this'll blow your mind. That guitarist he's got now, Randy Rhoads, he's unreal." There was no time to dwell on it. The crowd was already shifting, the atmosphere turning electric. Something was happening. You could feel it in your bones. I looked down at the ticket again. Motörhead, Black Sabbath, no mention of Ozzy, no clue what we were actually in for. But the lie on that ticket turned out to be the best twist of fate I could have asked for. I was about to witness something far more than a standard Sabbath show. I was about to see Ozzy Osbourne rise from the ashes, with a mad glint in his eye and a young guitar god at his side. By the time we found a spot on the pitch, the place was heaving. There must have been 30,000 of us, and every single one looked like they'd been dragged through a record shop backwards. Long hair, bullet belts, ripped jeans, patched up denim jackets hanging off shoulders like tribal armour. Some were shirtless, some had homemade tattoos, and everyone reeked of patchouli oil, fags and cider. You couldn't help but feel like he'd landed in the centre of something massive, a metal mecca. There was no mobile phones, social media, no live streams, no influencers telling us what to like, just word of mouth, Sounds magazine, the rock show with Tommy Vance and the music itself. But here we all were, from different towns and walks of life, gathered in one place for the same reason, the love of loud. Flags and banners waved above the heads of the crowd, maiden rules, metal till death, and one massive sheet spray painted with the words "Ozzy lives," as if someone had already known he was about to blow the lid off the day. There were groups of bikers, dads and their teenage sons, girls in leather skirts and lads in Saxon shirts arm in arm with Mohawk punks. You'd think it'd kick off with all that testosterone and tribal identity, but it didn't. It was surprisingly peaceful, unless you tried to push your way forward too fast. Then you'd get a firm elbow and a reminder to know your place. I remember looking around and feeling something shift inside me. I wasn't just some kid tagging along anymore. I was in it, part of something bigger than myself. Something loud, raw and real. The music had already started drifting over the speakers. Not live yet, just background tracks. But even that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Somewhere backstage the bands were tuning up. Someone would be pacing, someone else probably throwing up. And soon they'd come crashing out onto the stage to light the fuse. We finished the last of the cider. Not cold, not nice, but perfect all the same. Tim leaned over and shouted, "Bet this is the best day of your life so far." I just grinned and nodded. I didn't know it then, but he was absolutely right. The sun was still high when the first band hit the stage. I can't remember exactly who kicked things off. It might have been Vardis, but I remember the sound. It wasn't polished, it wasn't precise. It was loud, messy and perfect. The kind of volume that makes your ribs shake and your ears buzz even when there's a break between songs. We pushed in closer to the front, past a bloke with a mohawk painted red and white like a St George's cross, and found a decent spot near the centre. Everyone was pressed together, elbows, shoulders, backs. You didn't mind. It was like being part of a human amplifier, all feeding off the same energy. The support acts were no small fry. Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush brought proper guitar wizardry, but it was a bit too prog for some of the crowd. Lots of long solos, heads down, fingers flying. Then came Triumph with their big anthemic choruses and that polished Canadian sound and the PA breaking down. Plastic bottles flying in the air, you could feel the energy start to rise. Someone near us lit a spliff the size of a microphone and passed it around. I remembered what my dad said, no drugs, and I kept my distance. I was more than happy with the cider and the sheer glorious buzz of it all. Every time a band finished a song, the crowd would chant, "Ozzy, Ozzy, Ozzy," like a battle cry. The word pulsed through the stadium like electricity. Some were there for Motörhead, sure, but everyone was curious or desperate to see what Ozzy would bring. After all, this was a man who'd been kicked out of Black Sabbath, written off by some, and now was fronting his own band with a guitarist barely out of his teens. "Hope he's not off his nut," someone muttered behind us. "He's got a habit of not turning up." But he would, and when he did, it'd be unlike anything I'd ever seen before. The light started to shift, the shadows growing longer across the pitch. You could feel it coming, like the moment just before a thunderstorm, charged air, buzzing skin, and expectation hanging thick in the sky. We were already half deaf, and Ozzy hadn't even taken the stage. The sun was beginning to dip behind the stadium wall, casting a golden glow across the sea of heads when the lights finally shifted. The chatter, the chanting, the rustling of crisp bags and clinking of cans all seemed to pause. A hush spread across the crowd, the kind that only comes before something massive. And then, boom, a deafening roar of guitar ripped through the air like lightning through dry timber. The opening riff of "I Don't Know" hit us like a freight train, and the entire stadium erupted, not just cheering, screaming, like we'd been waiting for this moment our whole lives and didn't know it until right then. Ozzy stormed onto the stage, arms wide, grinning like a madman. Blue fringed jacket, eyes like fire. He looked like he'd been reborn. This wasn't the slow, heavy Sabbath frontman of Iron Man and Paranoid. This was something else entirely. Faster, sharper, unpredictable. Like a firecracker had gone off inside him and he hadn't quite stopped buzzing since. "Let me see your hands." 30,000 fists flew into the air. And then I saw him, Randy Rhoads, blonde mop of hair, all cheekbones and swagger, cradling his polka dot flying V like it was an extension of his soul. He didn't strut, he glided. Every note that came out of his guitar was like pure sorcery, delicate 1 second, devastating the next. You couldn't take your eyes off him, even the older lads around me, the ones who thought no one could hold a candle to Iomi, just stood there with their mouths slightly open. Ozzy fed off the crowd like a man possessed. He laughed, he screamed, he stomped around like a ringmaster at a circus from hell. Every now and then he'd yell, "You want to get crazy?" And we'd yell back like lunatics. And then it happened. I, that warped train whistle vocal. The opening bars of Crazy Train exploded from Randy's guitar, and I swear the ground shook. That riff, that moment, it's burned into my brain. The crowd surged forward like a wave. Beers went flying. People were bouncing in time with the rhythm, all of us riding that crazy train together. I stood there, a 14-year-old kid, cider still warm in my belly, mouth dry, heart hammering, and I knew this was something I'd never forget. It wasn't just a gig, it was a reckoning. A man who'd been cast out, written off, laughed at, was now leading a revolution from centre stage in Stoke-on-Trent. Ozzy didn't just return, he roared back from the grave, dragging us all with him. The second Randy Rhoads let rip with that opening riff, something changed in the air. It was electric, like someone had flicked a switch that lit the whole stadium from the inside out. Aye, and there he was, Ozzy Osbourne, centre stage, arms wide like a preacher at a service for sinners. That wild grin spread across his face. He was wearing this fringed jacket, the kind only Ozzy could get away with, swaying and whipping about as he moved. He looked like a cross between a rock star and a comic book villain, and the crowd loved it. When Crazy Train hit full stride, Port Vale erupted. There was no standing still. The crowd surged forward like a wave crashing against the stage. Cans flew, people roared, blokes twice my size were bouncing like kids on Christmas morning. I clung to the moment like it was oxygen, and Randy, bloody hell, that solo, it wasn't just fast, it wasn't just clever, it was pure feeling, screaming out of his polka dot flying V like it had something to prove. Every note he played seemed to tell a story, chaos, beauty, madness, precision. It was like he was channeling something otherworldly. Ozzy stalked the stage, pointing, clapping and behaving like a naughty schoolboy on a power trip. He wasn't just performing, he was conducting a riot, and we were all in on it. I turned to look at Tim, who just shouted "Unbloody real" over the wall of sound. Pete and Mitch were behind us, heads back, throwing horns in the air, mouths wide with disbelief. No one said it, but we all knew it. This wasn't just a gig, this was the kind of memory that buries itself deep and stays with you forever. To this day, whenever I hear Crazy Train, whether it's in the car, at home, or just blasting out of someone's speaker at a barbecue, I'm straight back there, 14 years old, bother boots, jean jacket and studded belt, warm cider in my gut, heart thumping, staring at a stage where Ozzy was being reborn right in front of us. And that train, it never stopped. If Crazy Train was the ignition, the rest of Ozzy's set was a full-blown rocket launch. He didn't just perform, he commanded. Like some unhinged general leading an army of headbangers into glorious battle. He was everywhere, screaming, laughing and waving his arms like a lunatic. One minute he was doubled over in manic giggles, the next he was howling at the sky like a man possessed. It was chaotic, but there was a rhythm to it, a showman's instinct you can't teach. And that fringed jacket, it caught the lights just right, flashing like lightning every time he spun or threw his arms wide. I'd never seen anyone move like that on stage. Ozzy didn't just stand at the mic and sing. He worked the stage, lived every line, every scream, every beat, Between songs he'd bark out these half-muttered, half-snarled lines to the crowd. "You mad bastards, I fucking love you all." Cue another eruption. It didn't matter if you understood what he said. It was all in the delivery. Pure energy, unfiltered joy. And you knew deep down he was as thrilled to be there as we were. He bounced from Mr. Crowley to Suicide Solution without missing a step, and every note Randy played behind him just amplified the madness. It was like watching two forces of nature trying to outdo each other, and somehow both winning. At one point, Ozzy sat cross-legged on the edge of the stage, just grinning at us. A full stadium of maniacs, and he looked as calm as if he was sat in his living room. Then he suddenly leapt up and screamed, "Let's go fucking crazy!" And we did. Everyone did, like puppets with our strings yanked by the Prince of Darkness himself. And that's the thing, that night, Ozzy wasn't some washed up has-been clinging to his Sabbath past. He was reborn, raw, wild, brilliant, and completely in control of the madness he conjured. People talk about icons, about rock stars who changed the game, but for those of us on the pitch at Port Vale in '81, there was no doubt in our minds, Ozzy was king. If Ozzy brought fire to the stage, Motörhead brought total annihilation. By the time Lemmy and the lads stormed on, night had fallen like a black curtain over Port Vale. The floodlights blazed, smoke curled up from the stage, and the moment the first notes of Overkill tore through the speakers, it was like being hit by a freight train made of noise. Lemmy didn't do small talk, no warm-up, no easing in, just wall-to-wall riffing and thunder. He stood at the mic, angled high above him like he was shouting at the sky, hammering his Rickenbacker bass like it owed him money. Phil Filthy Animal Taylor was behind the kit, smashing the drums like he was trying to break the stage. And Fast Eddie Clarke just kept pouring out riffs like molten lava. The set was a blur of classics, Iron Fist, No Class, Bomber, each one louder, faster, more ferocious than the last. It wasn't music, it was a sonic assault. And then it got mad. You could hear it first, the distant drone overhead. People started looking up, pointing, then came the shouts. Daredevils. At first we thought we were hallucinating. The cider was warm, sure, but not that strong. But no, it was real. Paratroopers, jumping from planes into the sky above the stadium. Proper airborne lads, drifting down towards us under floodlights and flares like they'd been summoned by Lemmy himself. The crowd erupted, not in fear but with absolute delirious joy. Some landed bang on target, onto the pitch, the stands near the stage. Others not so lucky. Word spread quick that a few had gone off course, crashing into nearby rooftops, a food van, maybe even the car park fence. Health and safety nowhere in sight. The bomber lighting rig, that massive mechanical beast above the stage, fired up mid-song, swinging over our heads like a low-flying warplane. Lights strobed from its belly, and for a moment it felt like we weren't at a gig. We were in the middle of an air raid. Years later I bumped into Lemmy in Stringfellows in London. We talked about that night. They wanted to do it every year, he said, smirking over his whiskey. But too many paras were smashing their legs on roofs, not exactly safe, is it? You know. And that summed it up really. That night wasn't meant to be safe, it wasn't meant to be polished, it was meant to be loud, lawless and legendary. Ozzy may have raised the dead, but Motörhead buried the night under a wall of sound and left the sky in tatters. As the chaos faded and the amps cooled down, one image from that day refused to let go. Randy Rhoads, centre stage, head bowed, fingers dancing across that iconic polka dot flying V, pulling impossible sounds from six strings like he was casting spells. Back then I didn't know his name properly. He was just the guitarist with Ozzy, young, lean, with that wild mop of blonde hair and a quiet confidence that didn't need swagger. But even without the years of hindsight, even in that moment you knew you were watching something special. It wasn't just how fast he played, although bloody hell he was fast. It was how much emotion he poured into every note. The solos in Mr. Crowley and Goodbye to Romance were haunting. Not just technical wizardry, they had soul. His guitar didn't scream, it spoke. When Ozzy stepped back to let him take the spotlight, it wasn't a break, it was a moment. The crowd didn't just cheer, we listened, really listened. That doesn't happen often at a metal gig, especially not with 40,000 people half sozzled on cider and adrenaline. But Randy had that power. He could shut up an entire stadium with a single bend of a string. And then, less than a year later, he was gone, killed in a tragic plane crash at just 25 years old. A fluke, a stupid, senseless accident that took one of the brightest talents rock had ever seen before he'd even reached his peak. It hit like a punch to the chest. Years later, in that same conversation with Lemmy, we ended up talking about Randy. He took a drag on his cigarette, stared off like he was watching a memory unfold, and just muttered, "Too good for this place, mate. Some lights burn too bright." I've never forgotten that. Whenever I hear D, his classic instrumental piece, I still stop what I'm doing just to listen, to remember, to feel that shiver down the spine that only Randy could conjure. And every time Crazy Train kicks in, whether it's on the radio or blasting from the speakers in my car, I smile, because I was there. I saw Randy Rhoads blow the roof off a football stadium in Stoke-on-Trent, and I'll never forget him. The journey home was a blur. We stumbled back to the Cortina sometime after midnight, our ears ringing like kettle whistles, legs aching, throats hoarse from screaming. The inside of the car smelt like warm leather, spilt cider and teenage exhaustion. Tim started the engine and said nothing. Just nodded once, like a quiet agreement had been made between all of us. No one needed to speak. What could we possibly say? The cassette that had brought us to Stoke was dead, chewed up and spat out during Bomber, if I remember right. So we drove in silence, windows cracked open, the wind whipping in, the hum of the tyres filling the gaps where music had lived all day. We dropped Mitch and Pete off first. Their bikes were still parked near a pub, both of them grinning like lunatics, waving us off with their helmets tucked under their arms. "Tell your mates you saw history," Pete shouted as he disappeared into the shadows. Eventually it was just me and Tim and the other two in our teenage motley crew. The car pulled into our village just as the streetlights were flickering off, that weird pre-dawn silence where even the dogs have packed it in. The kind of stillness that feels unreal after the bedlam we'd just lived through. When I stepped out onto my road, everything looked the same cracked pavement, same neighbour's hedge trimmed within an inch of its life, same twitching net curtains, but I didn't feel the same. I was still buzzing, still there in the middle of the stadium, with Ozzy screaming into the night and Randy setting fire to the fretboard. Still half deaf, still carrying the weight of something huge. I crept into the house like a ninja, trying not to wake my dad, but as I tiptoed through the kitchen, I spotted the Echo on the table, folded neatly next to his empty coffee mug. He'd been up waiting, just in case. I smiled, I kept my promise, no drugs, just a little cider and a piece of history. I flopped onto my bed, boots still on, and stared at the ceiling. I didn't sleep for hours. How could I? My body was home, my ears were ringing, and my head was still in that stadium. Smoke in the air, lights flashing, crowd roaring, and somewhere out there, I knew Ozzy was too. In the weeks that followed, things more or less went back to normal. School, chores, sneaking into pubs we were still too young for. But something in me had shifted. That day at Port Vale had lit a fuse, and it wasn't going out anytime soon. I started playing guitar, badly at first, mimicking Randy Rhoads solos in my bedroom with a tennis racket before I ever got hold of 6 actual strings. I'd stand in front of the mirror, one leg up on the bed, pulling ridiculous shapes, convinced that somewhere deep inside I had a tiny spark of that same magic. I didn't, of course, but that wasn't the point. It wasn't just the playing, it was the feeling. I started collecting vinyl with a new obsession, Maiden, Saxon, Judas Priest, even a bit of Status Quo when I was feeling nostalgic. I'd stick pins in posters, trade bootlegs with lads at school, scrawl lyrics on my exercise books. My room looked like a shrine to the new wave of British heavy metal, and to Ozzy naturally. I followed his career like a man possessed. Every album, every line-up change, every tour rumour, Diary of a Madman, Bark at the Moon, The Ultimate Sin. Each one felt like a continuation of that day in Stoke, like I was still there watching the story unfold from the pit. And life carried on. School ended, jobs came and went, mates moved away. I got older, wiser, a bit more wrinkled. But that music, that moment never faded. Even now, nearly 6 decades on, I've still got Crazy Train on rotation in the car, still crank it up when it comes on the radio, still get that same flutter in my chest when I hear Randy's opening riff. It's not just nostalgia, it's memory preserved in sound. Every now and then I'll tell someone the story, about being 14, about that flying V, the bomber rig, the daredevils falling from the sky, and they always say the same thing. No way. That really happened? Yes, it really did. And if you were there, you know. It wasn't just a gig, it was a rite of passage. Back in '81, Ozzy had something to prove. Kicked out of Sabbath, written off by critics, battling his demons. But on that stage at Port Vale, in front of 40,000 roaring fans, he proved he was far from finished. He wasn't just back, he was reborn. And from that moment on, he never stopped. The albums that followed were like chapters in a twisted, brilliant autobiography. Diary of a Madman dropped not long after the Heavy Metal Holocaust, and for those of us who'd seen him live, it felt personal. Tracks like Flying High Again and You Can't Kill Rock and Roll weren't just songs, they were declarations. Ozzy wasn't going anywhere. Of course, the chaos followed. Biting the head off a bat, the doves at the record label, getting banned from entire cities. It was as if his life blurred the line between myth and memory. And through it all, the music kept coming. Some of it unhinged, some of it deeply emotional, but always unmistakably Ozzy. Then came the telly. Who would have thought the Prince of Darkness would become a household name in living rooms across the country? The Osbournes was unlike anything we'd seen. Raw, hilarious, chaotic, and somehow heartwarming. We saw the man behind the madness, the dad, the husband, the bloke who shouted at the remote and tripped over the dog bowl. It made people who'd never listened to Paranoid or Bark at the Moon fall in love with him. And it made those of us who'd followed him since the start nod and smile, because we always knew there was more to him than the headlines. Through illness, addiction and tragedy, Ozzy kept getting back up. That voice, that spark, that mad glint in his eye, it never faded. He wasn't perfect, but he was always real, unapologetic, unfiltered, human. And let's not forget his final act of generosity, the Back to the Beginning show. One last concert in his hometown of Birmingham, wrapping up his career where it all began. And in true Ozzy fashion, he didn't just say goodbye. He raised over $200 million for charity while he was at it. Not bad for a lad who started his music career tuning car horns in a factory and getting banned from San Antonio for urinating on a monument. Ozzy wasn't just a rock star, he was a force of nature. He didn't just soundtrack our youth, he shaped it. And now, with him gone, there's a strange silence, a space that no one else can fill. But the legacy, that lives forever. When the news broke that Ozzy Osbourne had passed, I just sat there, didn't move, didn't speak. I wasn't shocked exactly. He'd been unwell for years, and we all knew the curtain was closing. but knowing it's coming doesn't soften the blow. When someone's been part of the soundtrack to your entire life, their absence hits like silence after feedback, strange, cold, unwelcome. I put the kettle on and did what any old metalhead does in a moment like that. I stuck on Blizzard of Oz, and when Goodbye to Romance started playing, I just sat there with the weight of 40 plus years of memories wrapped up in 3 chords and that haunting melody. I was 14 again, wide-eyed in wonder, ears ringing, watching Ozzy rise from the ashes. The lad everyone thought was finished, standing taller and louder than ever, leading 40,000 of us through chaos, joy and history. That was the Ozzy I'll always remember, wild-eyed, grinning, alive. Since that day he's never really left me. Every pub jukebox, every mixtape, every drive with Crazy Train turned up just a bit too loud. My wife loves that. And Ozzy, he's always there, reminding me not to take life too seriously, to laugh, to love, to make noise, and to never let anyone write your ending for you. He gave us more than music. He gave us permission to be weird, to be loud, to be ourselves, and somehow through all the chaos and carnage, he did it with heart. You never doubted his love for the fans, for us, and now he's gone, but the echo remains. In every scream from the stage, every riff in a bedroom, every kid discovering Bark at the Moon for the first time, Ozzy lives on. So yeah, it's goodbye to romance, but never goodbye to Ozzy. Thanks for everything, mate. Some days come and go without leaving a trace. And then there are days like 1st August 1981. A day etched into my bones, into my ears, into my heart. I was just a kid then, now I'm nearly 60, but I still carry that moment like a badge. The day I saw Ozzy rise from the ashes. The day music stopped being just sound and became something bigger. We didn't know it at the time, we never do. But that day at Port Vale was history. Loud, messy, brilliant history. We were lucky to be there. I was lucky to be there. And if you were too, well, you'll know exactly what I mean. Rest in power, Ozzy, and thank you for the noise. Go Animal.